Our battery had one. Other began the battle, drawing the fire of 2 Yankee batteries. Of course, is here on top of Loomis's Heights. We went into the fight while the enemy were firing upon us, one of their shells killing one of our horses before we got into position. The music of 12 Yankee guns and their whistling shells is not the most pleasant I've heard. For 2 hours we carried the duel half a mile distance perhaps. Again, their positions are on that hill way over there. Now, during the duel, of course, you have Karn's battery take a position over there. They're going to try to fight and duel with these artillery batteries over here, but eventually they can't make it. So then Stanford's artillery battery is going to come up. Again, 30th Mississippi is going to be right behind that battery, way off in that direction. Now, after the artillery duel ceases, Jones's brigade, along with John C. Brown's brigade, which we discussed actually the first time out here, is ordered to move forward towards the Federals to their front. Jones's brigade in order is going to march towards with the 27th Mississippi, the 34th Mississippi, and the 30th Mississippi, along with Lumsden's Alabama artillery. Now, are there any questions or observations before we start heading out?
Get your breath together because we're going to have some fun.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're about to have a lot of fun. All right. We're going to start going this direction. I'm going to cut it down. We're going to just go straight to Jones's Ford, and then we're going to come right back up to kind of cut out on time. So, are we ready?
Sure.
All right. You probably hate me now, but wait till we have to go back up to Loomis's Heights. I'm sure y'all really hate it then. So, but kind of recap. Remember, Jones's brigade is way off in that direction, supporting an artillery battery when the artillery duel kicks off. Eventually, they're going to get the order to move forward to attack Loomis's Heights, which of course we can't see right now. But they're going to start heading in this direction. Now, one thing I would like to really kind of get in your all's brains here for a little bit is why is it that James Patton Anderson, who's their divisional commander, is going to choose Jones and Brown to take this particular position here while he's off in the town. So Jones, as we're going to figure out a little bit later, has a lot of experience, especially in Pensacola. He was familiar with Anderson. They both were at Pensacola, Florida for a while with each other, so they're very familiar with each other. You have Brown, who commanded a brigade at the siege and battle of Fort Donelson. So he has a little bit more combat experience. So I think the reason why Anderson is leaving these two brigades here to attack the center is because they're experienced. They at least a little bit they know each other. Anderson knows their capabilities. And Anderson is going to spend most of his time in the town during the town fighting over there. So let's talk about Thomas Marshall Jones, who's right here. Now, some of the things that you'll learn during this tour is that there's a lot of myth and misconceptions with this particular brigade, especially with Jones. If you read Kenneth Noe's book or even watch the documentary inside the museum there, they talk about Jones as him hiding in a ditch or behind a log when this attack opens up. But I think as we go through this tour, you'll figure out that's probably not the case. So, Thomas Marshall Jones was born March 11th, 1832 to a prominent Virginia family in Hampton City, which is basically the Tidewater region. He will attend West Point and he graduates in the class of 1853, 47th out of 53 people, so pretty low in the class. Yeah. So he would have 2 brothers once the war would break out that would serve in the Confederacy. His oldest brother, John P. Jones, was actually aboard the Merrimack in Virginia. He was a naval man as the executive officer of the ship. After Jones will graduate, he will serve brief stints in New York, but then be sent out to Texas. He becomes the quartermaster, then the adjutant, then the aide-de-camp to the Brevet Major General David E. Twiggs, who is the commander of the Department of Texas out there. Why is this? It seems like they probably thought he had some kind of confidence. He is in supply, he's in commissary. there's also probably some family political connections going on. Remember, he's in a prominent Virginia family back in Virginia. So because of the connections he made, he was very well known with a lot of these Confederates that we'll see out here in the Western Theater, even also in the Eastern Theater. With the outbreak of the Civil War, he'll basically resign his commission in February of 1861, and he'll become chief of commissary for General Braxton Bragg in Pensacola. So he handles a lot of responsibility. To make that kind of, even though he is ranked really low in his West Point class, it seems that he's at least competent enough to handle supply, handle logistics, which is very important. Now, while at Pensacola, he will probably saw service, and I say probably because it's not really confirmed, but it's also not denied, during the bombardment of Fort McRae between November 22nd through 23rd, 1861, where he was reportedly one praised for all for his gallantry during the bombardment. On January 14th, 1862, he was selected to be the colonel of the 27th Mississippi. Though he was given command of the regiment, he was not really around the men for most of the time there at Pensacola. He's still going to be kept on the staff with Braxton Bragg, but he's just given this commission for the 27th. We'll talk about some of the reasons why. Now, with the federal thrust into the Confederate heartland and the subsequent collapse of the Kentucky line, Confederate forces around Pensacola are going to start being stripped and basically head north into Mississippi for the main federal, or Confederate thrust rather, toward Shiloh. Now, with the Confederates withdrawing from the area, Confederate General Braxton Bragg will give command of the city and the future withdrawal from the city to Jones. Nobody else. So, with that, whenever Jones actually takes control of the city, he actually will quickly institute martial law. He'll erect gallows outside of the city and say any deserters, anybody coming into the city, that's what you'll get. He doesn't allow anyone in because he believes that there are spies coming in, and if he's going to have to withdraw from the city, he has to keep everything as secret as much as he possibly can. Now, of course, as you can probably can imagine, this doesn't bode over well with the town folk of Pensacola. Whenever they start getting word that the Confederates are going to likely push or pull out of the city, they are starting to beg him, they're begging anybody for the Confederates to stay in Pensacola. Now, by March, Jones will begin plans for the withdrawal from the city, and over the course of 2 months, he will move as much military supplies as he can from Pensacola over to Mobile. Now, there are Federals in Pensacola watching this slowly but surely happen, but he's trying to keep it a secret as much as he possibly can. On the night of May 9th, 1862, he evacuates the city, burning any military items that could be of use to the Federal soldiers, an act that drew stark criticism from many of the civilians and the Naval Command there, saying that he could have done it a little bit better, or he could have... Basically, I think they were just kind of griping because he was leaving, so it didn't matter what he was going to do. He was just going to piss off a lot of people. Now, under his command during this withdrawal, it's no small number. There's about 1,000 to 3,000 or so men under his command during this withdrawal as he's going to Mobile. What I'm trying to indicate is that he's clearly competent enough to his superior officers. He can clearly lead well over 1,000 men, and he can get out as quickly as he possibly can. After his withdrawal from Pensacola, Brigadier General John H. Forney, his direct superior, will hear of a lot of the griping among the naval officers as well as civilians, and Forney will actually vouch for him, saying, knowing him to be an officer of discretion and capacity. And throughout the rest of the report, he essentially says, if there's any wrongdoing, it was my fault, not Jones's. Jones is a great commander. He knows what he's doing. Now, is this because of the people he knows? Because he knows a lot of high-ranking officials, or is it because he's actually a competent commander? I think it's probably the latter. They're giving him this much responsibility. After they get outside of Pensacola, they'll go to Mobile, and from there, this is about the same time that the Confederate Army is reorganizing and moving to Chattanooga. Jones is eventually going to get to Chattanooga, where he's going to be given command of a relatively fresh brigade of the 27th, 30th, and 34th Mississippi Infantry, as well as Captain Charles L. Lumsden's artillery. Now let's talk about some of those regiments. The 27th Mississippi Infantry. There is a lot of, what shall we say, mystery as to how many men they'll actually have out here at Perryville. This is just from 3 sources alone. The Memphis Daily Appeal will say that the 27th Mississippi here at Perryville will have about 260 men. Kenneth No's book will say they'll have about 350. And Chuck Lott says that they'll have about 597. Now you might be thinking, why is Chuck giving that number? Chuck, for years, apparently was researching this brigade and got to about 80% of the men from all the 3 regiments, detailing where they were at, when they were at, everything as much as possible could, about 80%. So, could be that high of a number, could be, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you 100% sure. I'm just telling you that this is what I've been able to find. Now, the 27th Mississippi was raised during the fall of 1861 and included men all across the state. Oddly enough, it had about 11 companies rather than the standard 10. At its conception, it struggled to have a commanding officer and lacked a thus certain discipline to the command. To combat this, General Braxton Bragg brought in a former United States Marine Corps officer, Andrew Jackson Hayes, to shape up the men. Now, Mr. Hayes is going to be born in Alabama and had prior service in the Mexican-American War. Toward its conclusion, he joined the United States Marine Corps as a second lieutenant in 1847. The reason why he joins the Marine Corps is his brother, Charles Hayes, is also in the Marine Corps. From there, he will serve in the barracks in Washington, D.C., then Pensacola, and he'll actually join the USS Cumberland into the Second Mediterranean Cruise, where they will actually see the turbulent Italian unification while they're off in the sea. Now, eventually he'll be sent home where he's aboard the sloop Savannah. Once the war starts looming around, he'll actually participate in the seizure of Fort William McHenry in Baltimore in January of 1861. But by March, he's going to resign his commission as a first lieutenant and accept a captaincy in the newly forming Confederate Marine Corps. Now, after he joins the Marine Corps, he's going to try in vain to raise Company D of the Marine Corps for about 3 months inside Memphis during the fall of 1861. But during November, he's going to be transferred to Pensacola, where his company was disbanded and its personnel was transferred to other Marine Corps units. But as a result of that vacancy, Braxton Bragg is going to see what type of officer he is, and he's going to take him and put him inside the 27th Mississippi. Bragg said of him that he was an excellent disciplinarian, a very good officer, and has no superior, if any equal, of his grade in this army. So Bragg thinks highly of this guy, and probably for good reason. Apparently the 27th Mississippi has a very cocky behavior with him, especially when they get into Mobile. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But so mixed within the company is a very interesting amount of characters. Company K of the regiment was the only one at the time of Perryville that had Enfield rifles, and thus were the skirmish company of the entire brigade. Also inside the regiment are men from Jones County, Mississippi. Anybody recognize that name?
Yep.
Who's seen Free State of Jones? Raise your hand. Yeah. Those guys are from that county. So that county is filled with a bunch of yeoman farmers, poor farmers. And actually at the outbreak of Mississippi's secession, Jones County will send a representative and tell him not to vote for secession. Well, in the course of events, and as this guy's writing back, he got caught up in the moment and accidentally voted for secession. When Jones County figured this out, you know what they did? They made an effigy of him and burned it in the town square. It kind of tells you what Jones County thinks of this war. Now, also interesting is that the famous Newton Knight, right? Matthew McConaughey, his nephew is here at Perryville. Jesse Davis Knight. He's a member of Company B, that is Jones County. Now, it was commanded, Company B, that is, was commanded by Captain Amos McLemore, who is a devout secessionist and known for the toughness of his skin and bravery. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Now, the 27th will be sent out to Pensacola. We'll stay there and become very familiar with Hayes. And he's going to be their drill instructor for several months. Eventually, after they withdraw, go to Mobile. They will be very rowdy in Mobile. Apparently, one account said that they spent a lot of nights with a lot of ladies in one particular street. Let your imagination go where it wants to. It just sounds like Marines to me, to be honest with you. But So after that, they're going to be withdrawn and go up to Chattanooga. And eventually, while they're there, they'll finally get a major to the regiment, George H. Lipscomb of Clark County, Mississippi. He was added to the regiment along the way, and he was a very wealthy planter. At the time of the Civil War, he had a wealth of about $71,000. Today's money, that's about $2.7 million. So he is a very wealthy man. He's a husband of 2 girls and a wife. And at the same time, Hayes, who has been a part of the regiment for several long months, is going to try to get a lieutenant colonelcy in the regiment, but is overridden by Jefferson Davis, who puts James L. Autry as the lieutenant colonel of the 27th Mississippi. Now this is where we get into one of our first myths about Jones's Brigade. Lieutenant James L. Autry was not here at Perryville. He was still in Vicksburg. He did not command the regiment here. That is one thing that I found. He's still in Vicksburg, and because of the absence of Autry, Bragg is going to use his ways to basically make Hayes a lieutenant colonel of the regiment, and the men love him for it. They respect Hayes. You got to imagine, there's a relationship here with Hayes. When he trains these men, he's a captain. All right, he's getting familiar with the men on a level that most guys probably don't. Mind you, Jones, who's still the colonel of the 27th, has no relationship with the men whatsoever. He is the commander in name. Now, moving on, we have the 30th Mississippi. Now this is from Chuck Lott's number. This is about 467 men. Remember, he did about 80% of these 3 regiments. So it seems like it's kind of close, because an account from the 33rd Alabama actually has them about 400 or so men. So it's kind of close to where they probably are. The regiment was originally authorized by President Jefferson Davis to serve as a 12-month unit for local service within the state. But however, when the federal thrust comes into the heartland, it was mustered into Confederate service in April of 1862 with approximately about 760 men. So they get in April 1862. Here at Perryville, they're probably at about 400 or so men. Its lieutenant colonel was George L. or Galbraith. I've seen 2 ways of saying it. Falls Neal. He was known as a Loco-Foco Democrat. Anybody have any idea what that means? I didn't either, so I looked it up for you all. It basically means somebody who continues to speak after they turn out the lights. So basically, he likes to hear himself talk. All right. Now, he would actually be born in Tennessee. And after the Indian Removal Act comes into play, he'll come down into Mississippi and basically become a very devout lawyer as well as a politician in that state. He's born in 1811 in Tennessee, by the way. So basically, by the time that he gets here to Perryville, I believe he's about 50 or so. Somebody correct my math if I'm wrong, but I think he's about 50. But on May 11th, 1862, it reported for service at Corinth and was placed into a brigade with the 37th Mississippi under the command of James Patton Anderson, their divisional commander here at Perryville. And again, it would be placed into Jones's brigade. Now we have the 34th Mississippi. Chuck Lott's number has them about 570 men. No's number has them about 300. Now, the 34th was also known as the 37th Mississippi. It was formed in April of 1862 in Holly Springs, Mississippi, under the command of Colonel Samuel Benton. Benton was a very well-liked and respected member of that community in Holly Springs, and he actually had prior service in the 9th Mississippi Infantry, serving in Pensacola. Eventually, after that reorganization of that unit, he'll form the 27th, and he'll actually bring a lot of his friends who are former officers or privates of the 9th into the 34th Mississippi. At their start, they'll have about 780 men. They'll move to Corinth, where they'll fight at their first battle in Farmington, and then they'll go to Chattanooga, where again they're placed into Jones's brigade. Now we have the 2nd Alabama Battalion Light Artillery, also known as Captain Charles L. Lumsden's artillerymen. They'll have somewhere in the neighborhood here at Perryville about 170 to 125 men. At the start of the war, Mr. Lumsden was an instructor and commander of the cadets at the University of Alabama. He was a recent graduate of VMI, graduating in the class of 1860, and moved to Alabama to instruct the cadet corps there. At the start of the conflict, Lumsden organized an artillery battery and was moved to the defenses of Mobile And after the Confederate withdrawal towards Corinth after their defeat at Shiloh, Lumsden's men were ordered north to the army. Once there, they would actually relieve Charles P. Gage's battery. Now, I've seen several reasons why. They said they took their guns or relieved them of their guns. Not 100% sure. When I looked at it, Gage's battery reported to have had 2 3-inch rifles and 2 12-pound howitzers. Lumsden's battery, when they get to Corinth, they'll have about 6 6-pound rifles and 2 of them Parrott rifles. So the guns aren't matching up. I think it was just to relieve the battery. The reason why is that Gage's battery was apparently made up of men who were a little bit older. And after the Battle of Shiloh, I think from what I read, they just basically gave out. They were really tired. They were attached to, I believe, Chalmers Brigade, I want to say. And they had to go up and down ravines, and they took a substantial amount of casualties as well out there. So during the siege of Corinth, the battery was attached to Chalmers, Mississippi Brigade. The battery saw action at the Battle of Farmington. And during the Confederate retreat from Corinth, so many men of the battery had dropped out from sickness that Chalmers had to detach several men from the 10th Mississippi Infantry to fill out the vacancies in the battery. Now, whether or not those guys are out here, I'm not 100% sure. I imagine if they had that many guys just drop from sickness, maybe they are, but I'm not going to confirm that. I don't know. From Corinth, they'll move to Chattanooga, and again, they're going to be placed into Jones's brigade. Now, kind of got a base layer of understanding who maybe some of the characters are of this. We have a lawyer, we have somebody that likes to hear himself talk, and we have a grizzled Marine Corps vet who are commanding these guys. We have Jones, who is basically a staffing. He's with the staff all the time, who's going to be commanding. So you'll probably see how all these character developments are going to intertwine here at Perryville. So, with orders to move forward, Jones's brigade would launch a fast movement towards the Federal positions along Loomis's Heights. The 27th Mississippi will be in the lead, with Company K being the skirmishers for the entire brigade. They'll be followed by the 34th Mississippi, and the 30th Mississippi will be in their rear. Now, Lumsden's artillery is falling, but eventually they're going to scrape off over to here toward the hill. We're not going to go over there just for the sake of time. But this is an account of their movement towards this direction. Now, this is from Stanford's Mississippi Battery. He says that about the time the 30th Mississippi Regiment, which had been posted in the rear of the battery, moved forward with a shout and were soon engaged in the deadly strife. Now, with Company K forward, they're going to start moving right behind you all down these little bluffs right here. There's going to be stone fences across the creeks over here, and they're going to start pushing some of the skirmishers from the 10th Ohio off in this direction. Correct me if I'm right, though. Okay.
You got it.
Now, also over here is the Bottom's cabin. Mary Bottom, who's over here, she's the mother to H.P. Bottom, which is off over in this direction, the Bottom's house. Now, I'm going to give you guys some primary accounts because I love you all so much. So, John Freeman of the 34th Mississippi. Pickets firing before daylight. Cannonading commenced early. We was ordered out in line about 12 o'clock when our battery opened fire on the enemy's battery. 3 horses was killed and 1 gun disabled, no one killed. At about 3 o'clock, we charged over a fence we had been behind, down a steep bluff. It's the one he's literally describing right here. Very rough and rocky. Up a rocky branch, one he's describing right here. Where we was ordered to take off our knapsacks. J.W. Freeman was left to guard them. Boy, what a job Freeman is going to have. Wow. Now, I imagine this is probably a good spot because can you guys see Loomis's Heights up here? No. It's a good safe place for it. This is from Private George M.C. Davis of the 30th Mississippi. That battle was our first regiment was ever in. At about 2 p.m., our regiment formed in line of battle on top of a long, high ridge. Our cannon was stationed along on the top of this ridge. The Federals occupied a high hill about 1 mile in our front, and their cannon was stationed along this hill. And there was a small hill in between us. He's talking about this one right here. And about 300 yards from the Federals. About 2:30 p.m., the artillery on both sides let loose, and we were ordered to lie down. And you can't imagine how quickly that order was obeyed. Remember, this was our first battle. Limbs falling all around us, men and horses being torn to pieces, and shot and shell plowing through our ranks made it a little demoralizing. But about 3 p.m., we were ordered forward. We moved out of the timber into an old open field in plain view of the enemy. They turned on their artillery on our advancing line, and as they cut great gaps into our line, we would close up and press forward. We soon got so far down the slope that an intervening hill protected us from their artillery fire, and we moved on till we came to the top of the little hill, and the battle began in earnest. So any questions or observations while we're down here?
We chuckled about TMJ graduating 47th, but rank doesn't mean capability. Henry Alec. You also got to keep in mind that rank is also dependent upon demerits. So these guys he could have been super intelligent, had some demerits. I don't know what his demerit history is like. But,
I didn't look into that.
So rank at West Point may or may not be an indicator of future performance. So.
I would say if they're giving him a lot of these big responsibilities early on too, I'd say he's got to be competent to at least some degree. I mean, he's got it. So if we are ready, we're going to send up to Jones's Ridge and follow Jones's Mississippi Brigade up there.
Jones let them in there.
Maybe he will be.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
That's right. I mean,
They're asking, are we synced?
yeah. It might have already happened.
Behind you, again, I want you guys to look and see that hill way off in that direction with that lone tree kind of standing up. That is where Jones's Brigade is starting off this attack. And they are moving in just the direction. So remember some of those primary accounts where they're talking about getting hit by artillery fire. Look, artillery batteries are right over here, so they have a perfect shot on them when they're coming forward. Now again, Company K is in the advance of the rest of the brigade. They're going to start moving into this direction, actually more towards the right over here. Before them is just going to be this hill right on top over here, which I believe is going to be a little bit of a new interpretation, but all that they're going to see in this brief moment in time, as we're going to look through some primary accounts of the blog about this, is just Simonson's artillery battery as well as the 10th Ohio. All they see is one battery as well as one infantry regiment for a brief space of time. But I'm going to let some of these primary accounts kind of back up what I'm saying to let you guys see what these guys are saying at this time. Now this is an account from the 10th Wisconsin. This is from HJH. The battle soon began, General. Our regiment was stationed behind the battery within supporting distance. For about 2 hours, we could hear nothing but the roar of artillery and the infernal whizzing and crashing of missiles. We were sheltered by the ridge, but in a long range of the enemy's hot missiles, we were descended at an angle of many degrees as more than measured the slope of the hill. When the rebels ceased firing at about 3 o'clock, we had 4 wounded. There of them were dreadfully torn and understand died soon after being carried off the field. Our batteries kept up their fire for some time, but the rebels remained silent. We began to think that they had left when we were ordered to the burrow of the hill, to the left of the battery on the double quick. Now that's from the 10th Wisconsin. So again, they're behind this hill and they're eventually going to be ordered. We're going to figure out why. So this is from a soldier in a newspaper account talking about this from the 38th Indiana. A few minutes before 3 o'clock, the enemy in force crossed the branch and made a rush for Simonson's battery. The 10th was immediately ordered forward, taking position to the left of the battery. On still they came, and we supported their batteries in the woods beyond. So they're talking about still being behind them. Again, we're going to get into this just a little bit in a little bit, but so again, for a brief moment in time when Jones's men are starting to slowly advance up this ridge, all they're seeing for that brief space of time is just Simonson's battery as well as the 10th Ohio. Now, before we get into that theory, I'm going to discuss the myth on Jones. So this is something, again, that's in No's book and also in the documentary in the museum. Basically, the myth behind him is that it was said that he was hid in a ditch or behind a log when this attack opens up, and he basically escapes most of the battle, and once the battle's over, he's going to rejoin his command. Now, that account was written in the history of Walthall's Mississippi Brigade. The guy who wrote the account was not at Perryville. He was in the 10th Mississippi, way off in that direction. All he said about it was that it was a rumor around camp that this happened. Okay? And this is the best kicker of it all. The book was published in June 1916. Jones actually dies in March of 1916, so there's no way. That's exactly right. And if you continue to read it, a lot of that book seems that they hate West Pointers. have just a disdain for some particular reason. I'm not 100% sure. They even call out St. John Liddell, calling him an ill-fitted commander. So if you like Liddell, you probably think, what the heck? But if you read the book, you'll understand that there's a certain bias towards these guys, but they love Walthall. So after, again, to kind of recap again, I would just want that to be known that Jones probably was not in a ditch or behind a log when this attack opens up, okay? Just remember that. So with that being said, the 27th Mississippi is going to be moving up to this ridge. The 34th Mississippi is going to be right over here to the left. And Jones is going to be eyeing that artillery battery as well as the 10th Ohio infantry way off in this direction. So this is an account from Robert A. Jarman of Company K of the 27th Mississippi. Again, he's the skirmishers. While upon the subject of the Battle of Perryville, I would say it was here that the 27th Mississippi was first under fire, and nobly did it stand the test. Here it was that Company K did its first skirmishing. While upon the advanced movement, Company K arrived at a precipice fully 30 feet high. Captain John B. Sale halted the company, called back to Colonel Hayes, not Autry, here is a precipice 30 feet high. Colonel Hayes responded, forward the skirmishers, which was done, Sale in the midst. Now, what that precipice was, I'm not 100% sure. You got to remember, the Bottoms cabin's over there. It is a farm. Are they talking about a fence? Are they talking about, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what they were talking about. I tried my best to figure out what was going on. This is from Private Orman Hupp of the 5th Indiana Battery, Simonson's guys, so he's over there. But a short time elapsed before the enemy could be seen at a mile distance with their bayonets glistening in the sun, for it was a beautiful day, and advancing toward us in 3 columns deep, everything was put into readiness to receive them, and about this juncture their batteries opened a crossfire which seemed to make the earth quake. This fire from the enemy was doing much damage, but we could only stand as best we could. So as soon as Jones's guys are reaching to the top of this ridge, he's got to make some quick decisions. So he can wait till the 30th Mississippi, who's in the rear of the brigade, coming up to launch a full-scale assault on Loomis's Heights with all 3 regiments. Or he could use the terrain to his advantage, sending the 27th Mississippi to the right, using the shorter route to hit the battery. If you take this road, you'll see what I'm talking about. I know you guys can't see it with the terrain, but it is just super short. And if you got to imagine, if Jones is only seeing a battery over here and an infantry regiment, and it is a short, quick to hit them in the flank, kind of makes sense. Over here, you got to look at how this terrain slopes slowly down. And up here, he's going to send the 34th Mississippi to hit the 10th Ohio, while the 27th Mississippi is going to swing around. All right? Now, in the meantime, he would use Lumsden's Alabama artillery, which is going to be put up on the hill right over here, to give some kind of suppressing fire, while the 30th Mississippi is going to come up to this ridge and use the ridge to draw any fire away from the Federal artillery or the infantry, while the 2 regiments attack in the front. They're going to use this ridge to their advantage. That's in essence what we're going to figure out here at Jones's Mississippi's brigade attack. And I think you can kind of see that there's a little bit more complexity rather than just sending 3 regiments down into this valley to their deaths. There's a lot more going on here. So Jones, of course, in my opinion, now this theory was also put forward to me by Chuck Lott. This is Chuck Lott's theory that he gave to me. And I think it's kind of making sense if you start looking at the primary source accounts. So he would start moving his men forward. Now this is Robert A. Jarman of the 27th Mississippi. He's going to be over here. When the regiment reached the place, Captain McLemore of Company B, remember that's Jones County, Mississippi, slipped over the face of the precipice and said, "Company B, follow me." And he was followed by the entire regiment. John Freeman of the 34th Mississippi, who's over here. We went over a rock fence, over a field, 2 other fences in about 2.5 or 3/4 of a mile, and we were ordered to fire and fall down, then rise and double quick into a general engagement commenced. This is from Frank Phelps of the 10th Wisconsin. Now there's nothing but the thunder of artillery pouring shell and canister into the rebel ranks. We laid still and watched our battery throw death into the rebels. We could see awful gaps in their ranks. And then they would close up, march over their comrades, never stopping until they got within 30 rods of us. and they got on top of a knoll. As soon as his men are put forward, the plan basically unravels. It's going to unravel very quickly, and it's going to cost a lot of men as to what happens out here. So Jones' men, this is going to be the first attack now that's going to unleash towards this direction. So Jones's men at once moved double quick down the slope, the likewise named ridge, and let loose a nerve-wracking rebel yell. To the front, again for that brief moment, to the front is Simonson's battery and the 10th Ohio. But that soon changed. With the rebels bearing down on the battery in only a matter of seconds, the 10th Wisconsin would surge forward and meet the oncoming wave of the Confederates. This is John Walt of the 5th Indiana Battery, Simonson's gun. At 2, an attack came in the center with a great fury. The battery met it with shell, case shot, and canister. The infantry charged front and met them in a close, almost hand-to-hand fight and drove them from the front. That is the 10th Wisconsin moving forward. And if you again look at that terrain over there, it is again like a drawbridge. They're able to quickly funnel in that direction a lot faster than they would have over here. And if you just see it, you can see how they can almost say that they're getting into hand-to-hand combat. They're right on top of them when they're getting into it. This is from HJH of the 10th Wisconsin. We were none too soon, for the rebel infantry were forming over the ridge in front of us. On they came, 6 lines deep, driving a regiment of our skirmishers before them, which hindered our firing upon them. This regiment had become disordered, and seeing the critical position we were placed in, did not take time to file away before us, but ran through our ranks. By this time, the rebels had gotten nearly down the slope. They raised a wild yell as they came up dashing upon our poor little handful of men, and all but a sudden a rash of musketry and shock from the battery that made the hills tremble, drowned their savage yells, and sent them back again, broken and dismayed over the hill. This is from Frank Phelps of the 10th Wisconsin. The colonel called out for us to get up at them, and we poured into a deadly fire into them. This is from Robert Kolseldorf, if I'm butchering that name. Is it right? Right on, Daryl?
I had to see the spelling because Kolsdorf.
Okay. got it.
Kolsdorf.
So, he's a captain in Company K of the 10th Wisconsin. The battle was a terrible one. Our regiment was ordered to support a battery which exchanged shells with one of the rebel batteries. After about 3 hours of uninterrupted artillery fire, we were ordered forward to receive and repel an attack of rebel infantry who were advancing upon us in great force. We came forward on a double quick to a new position and maintained our ground for nearly 2 hours under terrible musketry fire at short range. This is Captain E.A. Judd of the 10th Wisconsin. Until 2 p.m., it was only with cannon escort, a few skirmishes. Then a large force of infantry was seen advancing. A portion of it was formed in front of Simonson's battery, the other off to the left, and then they made a desperate charge upon it. At this juncture, the battery opened up on them with shell, grape, and canister. The 10th Wisconsin, 42nd Indiana, and 33rd Ohio, which again, I think he's kind of getting his regiments kind of mixed up over here, which had been concealed, formed the 2 former on its left and the latter on its right, who each contributed their might. So at this juncture, Jones's men are going to be met with a murderous fire from the Federals to their front, and almost within an instant, the attack disintegrates into a hell inhumanly imaginable. Within the first seconds of the attack, Major Lipscomb, the father of 2 from Mississippi, remember he is a rich aristocracy kind of guy, he is shot and immediately killed. Ensuing that, it's going to be scores of privates, sergeants, and officers who are going to be cut down in these fields behind me. This is from Private Orman Hupp of the 5th Indiana Battery again. Our line reserving their fire until their infantry fired within 30 rods, which is about 165 yards. We then opened on them with finally, after 15 minutes, they fell back. At this juncture, confusion reigned among Jones's men, but they were not undeterred. To keep up the pressure, Jones and whoever was still in command of the forward regiments launched a second attack. We're going to see the second attack from Nemesis Heights. To kind of recap over here, to kind of basically sum up any kind of confusion, 27th Mississippi is going to come over here. They are going to lurch forward. They're going to be met by the 10th Wisconsin, who's just going to bear down right on top. 34th Mississippi, who's out over here, is using this slope up here to try to hit the 10th Ohio and Simonson's battery up there. And that's going to cost them dearly because of that particular way of the geography. We're going to talk about that once we get up there. But any questions, observations, anything that I can make a little bit more clear?
33rd Ohio makes sense because they are bending
I guess
Harris's
so.
line around. And if you're talking about that drawbridge,
They would be what, right over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
starting
I
to
guess
hit
it
that
would
low
make sense.
ground at the
Yeah.
end of this, at the end of Loomis's Heights, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That right flank regiment for Jones would be hitting.
Yeah. Hitting all
That does make sense. All right.
Okay.
Son of a gun.
What can I say? All right, we're gonna make the ascent up to Loomis's Heights. I'm sorry. At that distance, you can literally walk right there, and you're right on top of Loomis's Heights. So again, the drawbridge that I'm talking about is right in front of us.
Gravel road.
Yeah.
That clump of trees right there? To my truck, right? Orange truck.
We've just seen the first attack, and the results were just absolutely terrible for Jones's guys. Remember, they attacked for roughly about 15 or so minutes before they were repelled and pushed back. With that, Jones is going to try to reform his brigade for another assault. But one thing I kind of want to make known to you all. As we were coming up that ridge, can you kind of see why Jones more than likely did not want a regiment coming up that steep of an incline? Instead, using that geography to his advantage as well as this gentle slope. I mean, just look at this. Compared to that, it just makes sense there. Now, this is going to be the second attack. After reforming the 27th Mississippi and the 34th, they renewed their attacks with more vigor, like that of a hornet's nest that had been stirred up. Still leading the 27th Mississippi is Hayes, who's going to push his men forward much harder. The 34th is going to keep trying to push their attacks with much of the same results, but this time, during the second attack, they are going to be met with a murderous crossfire. You can see how this terrain allows for a crossfire out here. Just to give you an idea, Company K on the right of the regiment is going to enter this field with about 43 men. One account says they come out with 4, another account says they come out with 7. Brutal. This is from HJH of the 10th Wisconsin Infantry. But they had determined to take the battery at all hazards, and rallying again soon made their appearance on the burrow of the ridge, this time more cautiously, and the work of death began on our side. The rebels had good rifles. What about that? And they showed a coolness that was aggravating. From this time the slaughter was terrible. It seemed that we must be annihilated. So dreadful was the shower of lead and missiles that whistled and crashed in a hellish glee around us. Desolation, destruction, and horror reigned. Triple kings of death lurked in every breath that was fit past him. This guy's really writing it. It's really good. But the groans and the shrieks of the wounded and dying could not be drowned out by the roar of artillery, nor could our eyes escape the sickening sight. Yet our men had fought well, fought nobly, nor the thought of one moment of yielding an inch of the ground they had been given to hold. This is from Lieutenant Harrington of the 10th Wisconsin. At one time, 3 rebel regiments were seen to prepare for a charge on the 10th Wisconsin and 10th Ohio Regiment. They were at the time supporting Captain Simon's battery, which was making great havoc in the rebel ranks. When General Rousseau saw them, he ordered Captain Simons was to hold his guns to the muzzle with canister, then await for his order to fire. He also ordered the infantry to reserve their fire until he directed them to shoot. 2 rebel regiments on the right and left were at the same time pouring a galling and continuous fire into our brave men. They stood, our soldiers, like statues, and on came the rebels. Rousseau stood upon his horse with his hat upon his broken sword, and apparently unmoved as a man of bronze. On came the rebels in solid column with fixed bayonets, and it seemed as if our single column of heroes would be swept from the earth like chaff before them. Still nearer the heavy tread came the solid mass of rebels, and there sat Rousseau upon his horse, still unmoved. Began to be surprised that he had lost the presence of his mind, or the reason entirely. The rebels were within a few rods of our unflickering column, when, as quick as a thought, Rousseau darted up and down the line and roared at a thunderous tone, "Now, boys, give them hell." First came the boom of the cannon as they vomited forth their enormous charge of cannonballs, which caused whole ranks of rebels to bite the dust. This was followed by the fire of the 2 regiments of infantry, which finished the business. What the rebels were left alive fled in confusion. In this aftermath, though I'm not 100% sure, the officer corps of the 34th Mississippi is going to be cut to pieces. We'll talk about them in just a little bit. Now, during the second attack, you're probably wondering, what about the artillery support that's supposed to be off in that hill? What about the 30th Mississippi, who's behind this hill, supposed to give them covering fire? So, once Jones's first attack commenced, Lumsden's artillery battery would have planted its guns on the hill right over there. If you guys can kind of see it, it's off to the left. It's that little break over there. There's a little cannon over there that you can vaguely kind of see. Once they commenced firing upon the Federals to their front, by a comedy of errors, fired most of their shots on the hill on Jones's Ridge right in front of them because of an optical illusion. They thought the Federal battery looked as if it was that close when in fact it was over here. So a lot of their artillery shells are just being planted right behind Jones's Ridge. So that essentially dilutes any of the artillery support these guys would have enjoyed. This is from James T. Starcy of Lumsden's Artillery. I consider it almost miraculous that we came out alive. Our battery fired about 200 rounds, with what effect we could not exactly tell. Every once in a while, we could see quite a commotion among the enemy. They dismounted one of our guns, killed 3 of our horses, and wounded 2 of our men seriously. 1 in the head and 1 in the leg. Several were scratched and bruised. Corporal James N. Shivers had lost his toes mashed. Charlie had the port fire stock cut close to his hand as he was about to touch off the gun. Everyone had escapes, and we ought to be thankful we came off as well as we did. We have not seen one poor fellow named Benjamin F. Woolley since the battle, and supposed he was killed as a man answering his description in the rear of our battery. We ceased firing at about 3 in the evening, and the infantry went into action, and then the fighting began. Indeed, it was awfully exciting while going on, but after seeing the battlefield, it is horrible. A good many of my men went over the battlefield that night, and I was too tired besides and had enough. Now, if you probably heard a phrase in there, a port fire. When I came across this, I had no idea what in the world that was, but apparently it's a method to use to fire cannons right before the induction of friction primers. And so imagine like a Roman candle type thing where there's a flame at the end of this stick. And what it does is it's basically, once it's lit, it's not stopping for well over 10 minutes. And all you have to do is basically stick I imagine from what I've read, it was either a cloth or a piece of wood or something down to the tube of the cannon or even gunpowder in there, and you just light it and it sets it off. And it's only used for emergencies or rapid fire from what I've been able to figure out from these guys. So I thought that was kind of like an interesting little tidbit. So that's Lumsden's guys. So their artillery support is going to be basically minute for a little bit before they could figure out the optical illusion. But what about the 30th Mississippi? This is from J.W. Henderson of the 30th Mississippi on October 25th, 1862. The enemy battery, while there as in shot going on, except the artillery. We were lying behind, waiting behind, to support it if the enemy should charge it. And he's talking about the artillery battery way off over there. So let me find it again. They didn't do it as so after 2 or 3 hours of firing in that way. We started past about a mile right out through an open field with the shells and balls falling thick around us until we got in shooting distance with our muskets. We then commenced and had got for about 3 hours, but we had the advantage of a hillside where we could rise and shoot and fall down, load, rise, and shoot and rise, and fall down. He just keeps writing this, it's terrible. But anyways, Nessa was shot through the head with a ball and fell dead on the field. This is from George M.C. Davis of the 30th Mississippi. At about 3 p.m., we were ordered forward, and we moved out of the timber into an open field in plain view of the enemy, and they turned their artillery upon our advancing line. As they cut great gaps in our line, we would close up, press forward, and as soon as we got far down the slope, that in the intervening hill protected us from their artillery, and we moved on until we came to the top of the little hill. That's the one he's talking about right there. And the battle began in earnest. Our color bearer had planted our flag at the very top. Their cannon musketry swept the top with shot and shell, and we were ordered to drop back and use the hill as a kind of breastwork, and only exposed ourselves when we arose to shoot. The deafening roar of the cannon, the bursting of shells, and the rattle of musketry made a perfect inferno. We had been thus fighting for perhaps an hour, and I saw our flag go down, and I ran to it and planted the remaining part of the flagstaff firmly on the ground and fired. But while doing this, I noticed the dust flying up some 50 yards this side of the enemy's line. I stood there for a while, watching, and what I saw that our men were, as a rule, were shooting too low. I ran back down to the foot of the hill where our colonel and his aides were, and told him our men were firing or shooting too low and were not doing much damage. Well, I bet they're wondering what in the world's going on over there.
That's our
Oh,
Texas.
Texas. All right, all right, yeah, thank you guys. Tough crowd. So, again, kind of recap. He's saying that they're firing too low, so they're not hitting the guys where they're over here. So he's going to go down to the base of that here where the colonel's at. And he said, "Who ordered you to make such of these observations?" I hung my head and had to admit that I had done so without orders. "Go back," he said, "and pass the order down the line to shoot higher, and you keep off the top of that hill unless that flag goes down." I went and did as I was ordered, feeling a little hurt at the remarks of the colonel. But we soon saw that the enemy was in confusion and firing was not so regular or deadly, for they were shooting wild and reckless. This is an account from HJH, and I thought this was pretty cool. This is from the 10th Wisconsin. The rebel colors fell repeatedly and were finally planted in the ground in front of their lines. So that's kind of wild. You're actually seeing what he's, like this whole entire account, they're all connected. I thought it was just so wild. Yeah. So whether or not the 30th Mississippi is providing any kind of help is to anyone's guess. I mean, if they're firing low while these guys are just getting murdered out here, I doubt there's any help at all. But after this, nevertheless, Jones decides, after the repulse of the second attack, he's going to decide to launch one more audacious attack to break the federal lines. And who's commanding the 27th Mississippi? That's anyone's guess. It was reported that Hayes was apparently wounded at this point in time, but that is just a report from a newspaper whenever he passed away in the late 1800s. But what about the 34th Mississippi? The 34th, as I alluded to, was cut up bad. Their commander, the guy who was commanding the regiment at this point, was the adjutant, Thomas Miller. Colonel Benton was severely wounded in the right thigh and the left hip. Lieutenant Colonel D.B. Wright, severely wounded in the forearm. It was shattered. Major A.T. Mason, right ankle. Sergeant Major Clifton DeMall's left arm was also wounded. The 34th Mississippi's officer corps was shot up so bad that Major Hugh A. Reynolds from the 30th Mississippi was brought over to command the regiment. Now, whether or not this came during the third attack, I'm not 100% sure, but eventually he's going to be brought over while these guys are trying to reform. But nevertheless, to Jones's front, the Federals were beginning to tire as well. In the intervening lull that lasted maybe just but a few seconds or minutes, the Federal High Command withdrew Simonson's guns, which by the end of the battle had fired 755 rounds, who had expended, of course, much of their ammunition here. After the artillery's long duel and unleashing it upon most of Jones's Mississippians, they're going to fall back. And because of that, Colonel Harris, the commanding officer atop Loomis's Heights, moved up his remaining reserve of the 38th Indiana Infantry under Colonel B.F. is it Scribner? Scribner.
Yeah.
Into the fight. This is from Colonel Harris of the 2nd Ohio. Again, he's commanding here. The firing became very warm on the right by the direction of Major General McCook. The 38th Indiana was sent to their support. I placed them in the rear of Simonson's battery, Loomis's having withdrawn. The action now became general along the whole line. Captain Simonson, who, with the batteries playing on him and heavy infantry force advancing on him and firing, nobly fought his battery until, having lost 16 horses and 14 men killed and wounded by the direction of Major Cotter, the chief of artillery, he retired his battery. I immediately directed the 38th Indiana to take position where the battery had been. This was not done a moment too soon, as the enemy were advancing upon us. What I imagine had happened that would make Jones try to do this third attack is probably because he sees this artillery battery being withdrawn, and you only have 2 infantry regiments here, and he's probably thinking, we've got them now. This is from John Freeman of the 34th Mississippi. We advanced until compelled to fall back on account of a heavy cross-firing, which wounded and killed half my company, 4 being associated and brother-in-law J.W. Hargis and orderly C.J. Cathy as J. Simpson and Corporal Oberfield. Those are the 4 guys. 2 others died from the wounds. I discharged my duties the best I knew how. I shot 18 times, then helped Captain Bowen to carry Levi Childress off the field and continued to help carry off the wounded till after night. Our little company was rallied and charged the enemy's battery under Adjutant Miller, one and the only officer who was not wounded in the command. So he's saying Miller commanded it as well. I've seen another account say that it was Reynolds that was over here, so I don't know. You can make it up if you want. But so anyways, this is from the 38th Indiana. This is a newspaper account who's saying this. I couldn't figure out who the name was. It was just so garbled up there. But it's from the New Albany paper. It was at this juncture that our regiment was ordered forward at a double quick across the cornfield, and as we had passed by General McCook and staff, we were urged for God's sake to save that battery. The distance was about a quarter of a mile, but was accomplished quickly. Not, however, until our battery had been ordered to the rear, and as we advanced in line of battle, it passed to the rear, taking a position. Our movement, however, was quick enough to stop the advance. Assisted by a well-directed fire from the 10th on our left, we approached the brow of the hill under a heavy fire of musketry and artillery, and occupied the position just vacated by our battery, and dropped to the ground and gained the summit and opened fire with our entire line. Immediately in front of us were 3 regiments and a battery pouring their fire upon us. The 10th, the regiments well covered by the hill behind which they were just amassed. Well, he's talking about the regiments, the 30th, I believe, over there. And he's talking about the 10th over here as well. But the 10th Ohio lay directly to our right, but reserved their fire, I believe, while the balance of the brigade was closely engaged. This is from Scribner as well. After having occupied several positions during the preliminary arrangements for the contest, I was ordered to the front to support a battery, 5th Indiana, but upon our arrival at the position indicated the battery was retired. I was ordered to form on the brow of the hill on the right of the 10th Wisconsin, which there warmly engaged, which we did under a heavy fire from the enemy's infantry, front of the right of my line. This is from Private Orman Hupp again, who's in Simonson's battery. The third charge they made upon our battery, they came within 20 yards, but we were forced to fall back with half of our number. This is from Colonel Harris again. By a well-directed volley from the 38th Indiana and Colonel B. Scribner commanding, and the 10th Wisconsin, under Colonel A.R. Chapman commanding, they were driven behind the crest of the hill. They again advanced, but were driven back. This was done for the 3rd time when they took positions behind the crest of the hill. So after that 3rd attack again, they get super close to the Federal line over here. Jones's men are going to eventually fall back. What's left of the 34th Mississippi falls back over there. The 27th falls back over there, and they're going to take cover behind that hill and try to hold on for dear life. So what remained of them, they hung on behind that ridge. Not far behind them, though, was Brown's brigade, who were fresh and ready for the fight. At the same time, this change in command happened. Not all of Jones' men actually relinquished their positions up there. There's several accounts of their men refusing to withdraw from the field and holding on, and they'll actually have primary accounts of saying that they attacked and took over Loomis's Heights. But with that, what happens to Jones's brigade here? Their losses were appalling. Now, Chuck's estimates has their brigade at roughly about 1,700 or so troops, and about out of that number, 225 are killed, wounded, or missing. That's Chuck's number. Now, again, the 27th Mississippi, this is Chuck's, that says that they had 574 here, 16 killed, 82 wounded, and 3 missing. 34th Mississippi. Nosebook shows that they had about 24 killed, 125 wounded, and 1 missing. About 50% losses for that regiment. Another says that they had 150 are killed, wounded, or missing. Now, Chuck's also has them again at about 570 soldiers here. They have about 31 killed, 92 wounded. It's questionable about the number of missing. Now, Lumstein's guys lose about 6 killed, wounded, or missing, and 4 horses. Their losses, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not going to give you a number because I don't even think we know, to be quite frank. But I know that it is appalling. It's no mistake to know that it is just an absolute loss for Jones's brigade. During the night of October 8, 1862, Jones's survivors scattered the battlefield, and many of his men collected the wounded and the scattered remnants of their men. Others collected discarded clothing left behind the Federal soldiers as they withdrew from Loomis's Heights. you would have scores of episodes of men trying to find their friends, brothers, fathers, cousins, you name it. We have the Garrison brothers, Charles, the youngest, who saw his brother Philip become grievously wounded. Philip was later captured and died in captivity. We have the Hicks brothers. Caleb C. Hicks was shot in the face at Perryville and survived later after that. While his brother John actually survived. The Rutherford brothers, three Rutherford brothers in the same company, Thomas, James, and Robert. Thomas was severely wounded, and during the night his brothers actually cowered around where he was at and comforted him throughout the night. Here's a good account from the aftermath of Perryville that I thought would be kind of fitting as we kind of wrap up this tour. Many of the inmates of the Confederate hospital at Harrodsburg had on clothing which had been taken from the Federal troops, and there was some complaint made that this had been, in some cases, taken from them forcefully. On asking the surgeons about it, they said that only one instance of kind, where when a Confederate soldier was seen carrying off a superfluous Federal garment. How do you say it?
Superfluous.
Superfluous. You guys got it. There you go. Let's see. Federal garment as an overcoat and a good one under his head. At my request, Mr. D, who was with me, asked him where he got it. He answered very promptly that he came by it honestly, and said further that when lying wounded on the battlefield, a cold rain came on, and a Federal soldier came up to him and asked him some questions, and seeing how much he was suffering, took off his overcoat and put it on him. I never shall shoot that man, said the wounded man. As he finished his story, the names of the parties involved are Kurt Thompson of the 2nd Ohio, the giver, and V.B. Walls of the 27th Mississippi, the recipient of the coat. So after the Battle of Perryville, Jones is still going to be kept in command of the 27th Mississippi. During the battle, or the Battle of Stones River, I believe Walthall, correct me if I'm wrong, is going to be ill and not at the battle with his brigade. And James Patton Anderson is going to have to take command of the brigade. Now Jones is going to be bumped back down to command the 27th Mississippi Infantry. But as you probably can imagine, there is some bad blood between Jones and the 27th Mississippi, because not only does that mean that Hayes is removed of command, he's actually put on the staff for Bragg, but Hayes, their guy that they love, the respect, is not with them anymore. And this Jones guy, who they have no relationship with, they know nothing about, and he's basically a Braggy and a Staffy, is with them now. Do they really like that? No, they don't. So in the opening days of the Battle of Stones River, Jones will actually become ill, so ill that he's going to have to confined to a bed. Now at this point, Autry is going to show up and actually command the regiment. Now in the opening shots of the Battle of Stones River, Jones is going to get out of bed, go to his regiment, and take over command for it. But he's instantly wounded as the opening shots of the battle is going to start opening, and he's going to go to the rear. Autry's going to command the regiment thereafter, and then he's going to be killed. After that, Jones feels like he's being kind of pushed over for command. If you read the accounts, it then becomes basically just a word game. It depends on who you believe. The 27th Mississippi says that, since he wasn't with us at Perryville or Stones River, he was kicked out of command and nothing was ever heard of him ever again. James Patton Anderson is mad at him because he left his command at the opening shots. I mean, he's sick. I don't know what he had, but it's clearly enough to make him bedridden the entire time. Either which way, Jones feels like he's being passed over command because a lot of junior officers are getting commissions to brigadier general, and here's Jones where he had to command the evacuation of Pensacola. He's commanding a brigade here at Perryville. He's not getting what's due to him, so he eventually is going to resign from the 27th Mississippi and go back home to recuperate from his illness, and he's going to spend most of the war out there. Hayes, the commander here at for the 27th Mississippi, will be used as a staff officer for Bragg, but eventually go out towards Eastern Theater and still kind of command some of the Marine Corps detachments of senior commanding, also naval detachments, but he's not with the 27th Mississippi after that. Neal, with the 30th Mississippi, since he's a little bit older, kind of by the spring of 1863, he's going to resign his commission and get out. Benton, who is so grievously wounded out here with the 34th Mississippi, is going to be kicked out of the war for about a year till he can finally rejoin his regiment. So with that, that is the end of Jones's Brigade Tour. Thank you all so much. I hope you guys learned.